Great. Hopefully you guys can all see this. And
Yep, you got it. We're good.
Cool, and you can hear me too. Excellent. Well, I am super excited to be talking to you guys today. So thank you, Karen, Nelson, everybody in the ATUG group for letting me share this presentation with you. I'm going to blow through this bio slide because I know we're a little bit short on time, and I'd rather get into the good stuff anyway, right? Get into the interesting stuff. So real quick, I'm a lifelong runner, super passionate about the sport of running. I'm a scientist by heart. You know, I've always been, my background is in exercise physiology and public health. I've done really fun and interesting work in my career in the research and product development side of things. And I've been involved in numerous areas of project management. Most recently, I spent the past 6 years with Atlanta Track Club, where pertaining to the talk today, my role there most recently was serving as the course director for the 2020 US Olympic Team Trials Marathon. And lastly, why Tableau? You know, I've always loved digging into the numbers and finding answers to interesting questions. So I was doing a year-end project analysis a few years ago, and stumbled across Tableau, and probably like most of you on this user group, just fell in love with the platform and all it could do, and I've been hooked ever since. So let's talk about what we're going to cover today. It's the 2020 US Olympic Team Trials Marathon, which was held on February 29th of this year in Atlanta, Georgia. So it was literally just a few weeks before this really bad pandemic kind of started raging here in the US. And what I really want to share with you is how analytics and data viz was integral in helping our organization run a flawless event. So before I get started, what is Atlanta Track Club? Who is Atlanta Track Club? Because I get asked this question a lot. And I love that it was in the Kahoot presentation. And so probably everybody knows the answer to this, but most people know us as the organizer of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution Peachtree Road Race. So we host the largest 10K in the world. Has 60,000 runners. It's held every July 4th. Last year celebrated its 50th anniversary of the event. Obviously, this current summer, we have postponed it to a different day on Thanksgiving. We'll see if we'll be able to get that in. So Atlanta Track Club has 30,000 annual members. It is the second largest running club in the country, and it's second only to the New York Roadrunners Club, who hosts the New York City Marathon. I think a lot of people aren't aware of that fact. The organization puts on 30+ events per year. That Kahoot showed a few of them, which was neat. About 125,000 participants cross our finish lines here in Atlanta every year. And these events serve pretty much the entire runner life cycle. So we get kids as young as 2 years old up to adults as old as 96 that participate. So pretty good widespread. Because of this reason, on what we do in the community as well as kind of nationally, one of the recent aims of the club has really been to message Atlanta as Running City USA to the broader national audience. And one important piece of this goal entails consistently putting on world-class elite level races like Peachtree, if you've ever seen the front of Peachtree. So when the 2020 US Olympic Team Trials bid process opened up, Atlanta Track Club threw its hat into the ring. 3 other cities were competing against us, Orlando, Austin, and Chattanooga. Atlanta won the bid, obviously, and it was a huge deal. We were really excited as an organization, and I think it was a big deal for the city. The city was behind us on this whole push, and they were excited to bring this to Atlanta. So let me give you a few quick facts on the trials if you don't know about them. So if you're not a runner, a marathon distance is 26.2 miles in length. The US Olympic Team Trials Marathon event is a quadrennial event. So it's held every 4 years, and it serves to determine the 3 men and 3 women who will go on to represent Team USA in the corresponding Olympic marathon event. So for our purposes, the 2020 trials here in Atlanta selected the 6 athletes who will represent US in the Tokyo Games. Smartly so, those Olympic Games have been postponed until next summer, so we'll get to see these athletes compete next July. How did athletes earn the chance to come to Atlanta and toe the start line? Well, they had to meet a qualifying standard on any sanctioned marathon course during a specific 2-year window between December 2017 and January of 2020. So I've got the standards shown here on the slide, and I'm going to fly in the corresponding paces. So if you're a male and you wanted to come to the trials, you needed to run a marathon under 2 hours and 19 minutes. That's about 5:20 pace. If you're a female, you had to clock a time faster than 2 hours and 45 minutes over those 26 miles. So that's about 6:20 pace. Just to give you guys who are runners a reference, go out there and try to just run one of those and then fathom trying to run 26 of them in a row. So how many athletes typically compete in an Olympic trials marathon event? The men's count historically has fallen in the 100 to 200 athlete range, whereas women's count has ranged around 115 to 250 athletes. So when we put in our bid process, our initial assumption was that we were going to see about 500 total athletes here in Atlanta on race day. But here's what actually happens. This is a quick graphic just showing some historical data dating back to 1984, which is actually the date of the very first women's Olympic marathon trial. So I wanted to start from that date. And really the quick visual here is just seeing the tremendous increase in the number of female qualifiers. So females are in pink here, males are in blue, and whereas the men in 2020 saw about a 23% increase in qualifier counts, the women had a whopping 107% increase in the number of qualifiers. The time standard in 2016 for men and women as a reference was exactly the same. So that was pretty astounding. So halfway through the planning process, after we got the bid, we realized pretty quickly that we were going to be hosting the largest Olympic trials marathon event in history, and not by a small stretch. So some of the key planning challenges that I want to jump into, and before I start, I just want to give you a heads up that I'm really speaking to you today from a course perspective, because I was served as the course director for the event, and this is the area that I lived and touched in. And quite frankly, really, it's the area of the trials planning process that really needed the most analytics work because of its complexity. So I'm speaking from that perspective today, primarily. So one of the first challenges once we got the bid was, hey, we had to design a course for these athletes to run on. So we had a few principles to help guide us. First, we knew we wanted to do a loop course. Loop courses are more logistically easier to put on. They're more cost effective. They're better for the spectators, or they're spectator friendly because you can see the athletes come by 3, 4, 5 times sometimes instead of just once. And in general, a loop course just creates more fan density, more energy, just more excitement for the athletes as well as the city. So we knew we wanted to do a loop course. Secondly, with Atlanta being on the national stage, we wanted and needed to highlight the city's gems in history. So we identified some landmarks that we wanted to hit. First one being Centennial Olympic Park, which was the site of the 1996 Olympic Village for the Olympic Atlanta Games in 96. We knew we wanted to take the runners down Peachtree Street and some of the iconic landmarks there, Fox Theater, Margaret Mitchell House, Midtown, just Peachtree Street in general is an icon of Atlanta. We of course knew that we needed to include the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic Site, given the city's deep roots in the civil rights movement. And then lastly, it was important also to us that the Olympic cauldron used in the 1996 Atlanta Games be included in our course route. So the third challenge of the course design is we had to take these first two elements, these first two challenges, and then make the course flat, or as flat as possible. And if you're from Atlanta, we call this Atlanta flat, because if you run, bike, do any kind of exercise in the city, you know that putting on a flat race or designing a flat course in Atlanta is a really, really, really tall order. So here's what we ended up with after a many months long process. And this is really just a simplified version of the course map. We have a nice, really beautiful official course map but it's really hard to read. So I'm kind of just including this very simplified, dumbed down version. Essentially the main loop, so the loop course consists of 2 loops, a bigger main loop, which is 8 miles, and then a smaller loop, which is 3 miles. So the athletes would begin and finish in Centennial Olympic Park, really right outside the College Football Hall of Fame. They take a left, head straight up Peachtree, about 2 miles, do a 180-degree turn, come back down the other side of Peachtree. We sent them east towards Martin Luther King Jr. National Monument, turn back west on Edgewood Avenue, and then back downtown where they would start a new lap. So the runners would do 1 lap of the main loop, 8 miles, 2 laps in the main loop, 16 miles. And then on the 3rd lap, we shuttled them down towards the Olympic cauldron and the rings in the hopes of giving kind of them a last little bit of motivation so they could try to muster the strength and try to punch their ticket to Tokyo in their last 2 miles as they headed back towards the start finish. So this is an elevation profile of this course I just showed you. And this was one of the first uses of Tableau that we utilized for the planning process. And this went up on our website early on. So again, it's built in Tableau. It shows kind of your 3 laps, lap 1, lap 2, lap 3. And we wanted the athletes and coaches to have a very precise and interactive view of the course elevation and the course topography with really granular data, because we knew that they needed to use it in their race preparation. This was a really important aspect of how they might strategize for the event. And just to kind of show you how important, or just tell you how important this type of information was, at one point during the planning process, Nike flew its research team down from their headquarters in Portland with a $12,000 GPS system and mapped our entire course from start to finish, not just including elevation data, but also looking at the camber and slope of the road. So they brought that back to their well-supported group of sponsored Nike athletes at Oregon Project and used the data in that way. So for those athletes who were not sponsored and may not have had the time and the money and the resources to get to Atlanta and see the course for themselves, this elevation profile on the trials website was a good tool for them. And this is just a screenshot, but it shows that you could hover over any part of this course and see some really granular data of the distance and the elevation at that point. Okay, so let me jump back into the key planning challenges. So aside from the course design, the other big bucket, and it was a scary bucket of challenges that we faced, were these great unknowns. First one being race day weather and temperature. So if you live in Atlanta, it can be wildly unpredictable in late February. This is just a quick graph showing the 2 days that bookend February 29th, and it's 10 years of historical data. So we knew that on February 29th, on the race morning, we could wake up to potentially a day that might have 20 degrees and snow on the roads, or we could be watching the athletes really suffer trying to finish their race in 80-degree temperatures. So weather was a really huge unknown that we needed to build into our course planning logistics and be prepared for icy roads, as well as, you know, hey, we're going to need to beef up our hydration areas if it's a really hot day. And then, of course, we had to build in any other type of weather in between these two. So let's talk about traffic, second big unknown. Atlanta has a metro population of 6 million people. We needed to shut down a large swath of downtown on a Saturday at noon. So I just want to let that sink in for a second. This is a huge undertaking. Once the race started, all the streets and intersections on the course had to be locked down completely and sealed, and in some cases reinforced for safety. So, and that was for about 4 hours. So we knew that we were going to be putting a whole world of traffic hurt and pain on the city and its residents. And it was really imperative that we worked really closely with the city agencies to develop detailed race timelines and contingency plans so we could minimize the impact that we were going to have on the greater goods. We worked really closely with the mayor's office, APD, Atlanta Fire, Grady Hospital, FBI, emergency management, you name it. We had very, very large interagency meetings to help us all get on the same page and figure out how we could do this. Third big unknown was that final athlete count I showed you a few slides ago. We knew we were going to be putting on the biggest trials event in history, but it was really difficult for us to know just how big that was going to be. And this is different than a Peachtree Road Race, where we can easily add 5,000 people to the race. It's very, very hard to add even a 10% increase due to all the complexities that go into putting on a trials event. So from day one, this final athlete count really dogged us, because that window, as I mentioned, it closed in January 19th of 2020. So just 40 days before the race event is when we knew we were going to get that final athlete count. And we obviously could not afford to wait that long. So early on in the process, we did kind of some deep projection analysis to get an idea of where we're going to land. And we actually, I showed you that number of where we hit 772, and we predicted that we were going to be somewhere between 750 and 800 athletes. So that was good. We did a good job on that prediction. That helped us a lot in the process. But I guess the essence of the athlete number is that in order for Atlanta Track Club to execute the weekend successfully, it was really critical for us to have a solid handle on that, and how a larger field, as it continued to grow, was going to affect various areas of the event. So last big unknown, and probably one of the most stressful, and this probably kept me up at night the most, was the appropriate time gap to use between the two race starts. And I say two, because remember, we were hosting the Olympic marathon trials for men and women. And in championship races, men and women can't start together for record-setting purposes. So we needed to figure out that sweet spot on how much time to separate the two genders. We only had a block of 3 hours from start to finish, and this was largely dictated by two main entities. One was NBC. This event was going to be broadcast live on a national, to a national audience. So we had a 3-hour block where we had to get the race started and get the race finished from NBC's standpoint. We also knew, again, as stated earlier, because of traffic and the impact we were going to have on the city, we couldn't afford to keep the city closed for 5, 6, 7 hours. We needed to get this race run and done and get everybody back doing their normal business. So adjusting the start is a lot like tugging on a piece of rope when you have a loop course. Because it's connected, every time you touch and change that start time between the two races, it has consequences later on during the race. And sometimes these consequences could be catastrophic. So we were always constantly fiddling with this start gap, trying to figure out what that ideal separation was going to be so that we could give ourselves the best chance of having a really good race day and not have any issues on the course. So I guess the point I'm trying to make with all these challenges is that Atlanta Track Club had 50 years of experience with road races, yet little reference for putting on a unique event like the Olympic trials, and really no hub of central hub of historical information to lean on. Every 4 years, the trials are hosted, by a new city, a new course, a new set of athletes, a new organizing committee with a new way of doing things, and nobody, I promise you, kept good records. So it was really hard to go back and kind of know what we were looking into. So we were definitely flying a little blind and more out of our comfort zone than we like to fly at Atlanta Track Club. So the first part of realizing what we needed to do is we knew we had a critical need. In order to guarantee a successful event, it was really important to analyze as many worst case scenarios that could happen on race day in order for us to plan so that we had so we could prevent these worst case scenarios from happening. And because we only had one chance to get it right, it became pretty clear pretty quickly that we really needed some kind of race simulation tool to help us look into the future. And this is really where Tableau came into the picture pretty big. The screenshot I show right here is the first worksheet in the process of developing this tool. We used GPS coordinates, so latitude, longitude, and ordered the waypoints by distance using this line mark. And what that gave us was this nicely traced course route. So we then saved this image as a PNG file and then used it as a background image in our simulation worksheet. So the second step, I clicked that a little bit too early, was we needed some runners. So we built our course, and now we had to have some little runners traverse this route. So where were we going to find them? Well, we analyzed the actual finished results from the 2008, the 2012, and the 2016 Olympic trials races. And fortunately, these results contain timing data for each mile split. So we had really great information showing us exactly how the races played out from the starting gun to the finish line. And then after analyzing each of these a little more closely, we decided that we were going to go ahead and use the full results from the 2008 trials to create the simulated 2020 runners. And the main reason for that is because the New York course back in 2008 was the most similar in topography to our course. And this is a quick visual showing that. So you've got New York City's course elevation profile on top, followed by Houston in 2012, Los Angeles in 2016, and then here's Atlanta down at the bottom. Hopefully you can quickly see how Atlanta's terrain was going to be the toughest any of the athletes had faced in quite a few Olympic trials years. There's really no flat sections on our course. Very, very hard to find a rhythm. So this, because it mimicked more of the flow of the New York race, we ended up using the results from the New York race to incorporate into our simulation. So once we had the timing data, we then used this to map the runners to the specific GPS locations on our route to then create the simulated race. And before I jump into Tableau, I just want to make one final note about that simulation. Prior to importing the data, we adjusted all of the 2008 times down or slower by 2 to 3%, because we needed to account for the fact that our hilly Atlanta course was going to be tougher on the athletes. And we knew we were going to produce some slower men's and women's races. So we made that adjustment to all the times because we knew these little details made all the difference when we were trying to build this race simulation tool to help us look into the future. So what I'm going to do is pop into Tableau here and bring you this race simulation. So hopefully you can see this on the screen. So let me give you a few quick reference points. This is the dashboard, well, the final dashboard we built, let me say that. This was one of many, many iterations, and a couple of things I want you to look at is this is where we landed on the start times between the men's and women's races. So 12:08 was the start for men. This was dictated by NBC. And then we, again, had a 12-minute gap from when the women were going to start. So the men right here on the course are in blue, the women are in pink, and I'm going to show you show them to you as they move along the course in just a second. But here's our filter that we use, and we used the time of day because this was the most applicable to many of the people we were sharing this with. Not all of them were runners, and this was the best way we could really kind of wrap our own heads around the event, but also share with others on what we were trying to see as the race unfolded. So you could click through every 12 minutes and you could see where the runners would be theoretically on our race course. I'll click through this for a second. The cool thing is you can also highlight the genders, so you'd be able to see kind of really what was going on. You can tell that Peachtree is a little tricky because we didn't develop to the detail where you could see if they were on the left side or right side of the street, but you could tell that information from the distance data there. So just click off of that. And we made a point really early on that we annotated where the male leaders and the female leaders were, as well as where the back of pack is. And that's what BOP stands for, because this was one of the really important things we were honing in on is when is this lapping going to occur? We knew the fastest male runners were going to lap the slowest female runners and vice versa. We knew the female leaders at some point were going to catch the slowest males. And it was imperative we knew where that was going to happen because there were specific parts and locations on the course where we knew it could not happen. So this tool was integral in helping us figure out that start time gap so we could really control how this race was going to flow from the start. I guess the one last thing I wanted to show, I'm going to brag for a second here. I wanted to show you kind of how powerful our predictive analysis was on this side. So we've got our male leader here, and his eventual finish time we had predicted was going to be 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 49 seconds. Well, on February 29th, Galen Rupp crossed the finish line first in Atlanta, and he crossed that finish line in 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 20 seconds. So we were under 30 seconds off from that prediction, which was pretty cool. The female, we had our leader, our simulated leader, finishing the race in 2 hours, 27 minutes, and 23 seconds. Alafine Tiliamek crossed the line first for the women's side in Atlanta, and she ran 2 hours, 27 minutes, and 23 seconds. So that was a little bit of dumb luck on that one. I can't believe we nailed it, but that was pretty cool. And really a take-home point here is that our predictive, a prediction of this simulation and the times we used matched what actually happened on the course. And that was critical for this tool to actually work. And it was critical in our planning, because if we had not gotten that right and and the times were off, they were too fast or too slow, we wouldn't have got the information that we needed to get in order to plan this event correctly, or we would have possibly had some issues happen on the course.
Holly, what did y'all use for that forecasting piece, the predictive piece?
Oh, experience. I mean, really just a lot of substantive experience with the data, and knowing kind of, hey, this is kind of what's happened in the past, looking at times, knowing what our course was probably going to do, knowing that hills tend to slow races down by a certain percentage. So it was a lot of, there was no specific tool. It was just a lot of digging into the data, snooping around.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
So let me see if I'm going to jump back out here, and I've got a ton of other data inside Tableau, and I'll share this with Karen and Nelson after we're done, so that people can dig around in there. But I think we're going to run out of time, so I won't bother to click in there right now. So let me jump back into the simulation, or into the slide deck. Okay, so let me get back to the slide. So just as a recap on that race simulation tool, it was really invaluable in helping us hone in on specific course locations and scenarios, and really helped us to develop plans accordingly. And being able to share this through Tableau Public was a really effective way for us to communicate and disseminate information to a large number of people outside our organization, like some of our key course volunteers, some of the city agencies, et cetera. So it was a way we could really share with them what we thought was going to happen. And they really enabled us to help build those timelines I was talking about with the city, to work with the traffic plan that we knew was going to happen. So 2 things on this map I wanted to point out with the race simulation tool. 2 specific locations that I think you're going to find interesting. One of them was at miles 2, 10, and 18. So remember, it's a loop course, so that mile marker shared 3 mile locations. And then the other one was miles 6, 14, and 22. And these were our 2 personal fluid stations. So this was personal fluid station number 1. This was personal fluid station number 2. And I mention these because I really think these were probably one of the most publicly interesting facets of the race, and one of the spots where we were most vulnerable to disaster. So what are personal fluids, you might ask? Well, each and every trials qualifier had the right to use their own fluids bottles during the race. This was in addition to the general fluid stations that we provided for the athletes. So at these 3 blue stars, we were providing Powerade, water, energy gels to every athlete on every lap, no matter what. So in addition to that, each athlete had the right to say, well, I'm going to use my own bottles and put my own concoction there and place it on the course at these 2 points. So, and they can put any kind of secret sauce in these bottles that they want: Gatorade, water, special carbohydrate concoctions, caffeine, anything that is race legal. So because of the loop course setup, each athlete would then be able to use a total of 6 bottles during the race. They're doing the course, they got to go around 3 times. There's 2 stations. They have the potential to turn in 6 bottles of fluids. So let's do a little math. 672 athletes started the race. 522 opted to use these personal fluid bottles. 3 laps times 2 stations times 522 athletes means that we collected 3,132 individual fluid bottles the day before the race. Our job as an organizer was then to collect these from the runners, assign them to a specific table on the course, package them in a truck, and then deliver them to its designated spot on the course where some of our best trained volunteers were going to help distribute these to the athletes during the event. On race morning, the fluids bottles were placed on 30 different tables for men. So the men had 30 tables to pick from, and the women had 50 different tables. They were a much larger race. Each of these tables were spaced 10 feet apart. And the runners had to remember their table number and their exact bottle location on the table. Remember that we had the largest Olympic trials qualifier field in history by a long shot. So a personal fluids program of this size and scope had never been attempted before. Each fluid station ended up spanning 4 city blocks. People thought we were crazy, but we had no choice. We had to do this. This was part of our gig when we won the bid. So the entire personal fluids piece really could be an entire presentation just by itself, and it is fascinating to a lot of people. So I just wanted to share 2 pictures and a few things to ponder. The first picture is what a personal fluids table might look like. This picture is actually taken from the 2016 World Marathon Championships. And you can see how all the different bottles are decorated in numerous ways. On our tables, there were a total of 12 bottles per 8-foot table. For the B athletes, these are some that had qualified with slower times, and our A athletes had 6 bottles on each table, and every single table had a bottle in the exact location. So if you were an athlete, you knew every lap. If you were scheduled for table 12, position 3, your bottle every single lap was going to be on that table at that same location. So here's a second picture I want to share, and this is a picture of Peachtree Street, where the first personal fluid stations was located. So notice the width of the road, okay? And remember that on Peachtree Street, we were using both sides of this road. Runners were going up, doing a 180 turn, and coming down. So as many as 400 runners early in the race were sharing just 2 lanes of road up Peachtree Street. Now, what I want you to picture 80 tables, and I apologize for not having a really good picture of this, but I want you to picture 80 tables in the center, right here on the center line, spanning 4 blocks, okay? Lastly, I want you to try and picture these athletes trying to find their specific bottles and grab them successfully, all while running, 5-6 minute pace. What could possibly go wrong? Well, lots of things, right? And here's just one quick thing that could go wrong. Imagine if the lead males were passing the back of the pack women here. It would be a complete nightmare. So these were the types of scenarios that we had to identify through that race simulation, because if a lapping were to happen at this location, this event would have been a catastrophic failure. Many folks thought we would fail here on Big Personal Fluids. Because it was such a tremendously large group of athletes, so much complexity, I think a lot of people were counting on us to fail. But we scienced the heck out of it, loved the challenge, and on race day, we completely nailed the task. Of those 522 athletes, I think maybe 3 athletes missed a couple of bottles or 2. It was really one of the biggest success stories of the trials event, certainly as far as the course goes. So let me see if I can break down the summary of the day. We had 4 of the 6 winners were actually underdog finishers, and that was exciting because it's always a little bit boring when before the race starts who the top 3 are going to be. So 4 of the 6 were underdogs, and that made the race really exciting. Our race produced one of the most exciting trials finishes in history, especially on the men's side. The 2nd and 3rd place finishers, which are Jacob Riley and Abdi, less than a second separated these 2. So they were screaming down Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Centennial Olympic Park, towards the finish line, fighting for that last chance and that last medal. Really exciting. And holy cow, did Atlanta come out for this event. 200,000 spectators lined the course. It was really, truly breathtaking. There were sections of the course. Let's take Peachtree, for example. Peachtree on our course was a 2-mile stretch. There were people 11, 12 deep, each side of the road, shoulder to shoulder, the entire length of Peachtree. The area down near the Olympic Stadium, overwhelmingly packed. It was amazing to see the city come out and support these athletes on February 29th. Really, really cool. One of my favorite quotes was from Molly Seidel, who was the second place finisher in the women's event. And she said, running that day felt like running through a 26-mile scream tunnel. That's how excited the fans were. We didn't have any major course issues occur, which was great. It was kind of a boring day for me. I was on my bike covering that course many miles. And it was great to not have to address any major things. We saw what we expected to see happen, and we saw it where we expected to see it. The personal fluid stations, as I mentioned, worked flawlessly. So it was a huge success. Let me talk about race day weather for a second. I had showed you that graph on the variability. The temperature on race day was fantastic. It was 50 degrees, but we had really strong winds. It was a constant, almost 20-mile-an-hour wind. And then so we had to basically take down a lot of our signage for the safety and protection. So I'm just going to wrap up and say the athletes, coaches, spectators, media, national governing body, all describe this event as the best and most well-executed Olympic trials marathon ever. And if you ever have a boss that that is you love but is not necessarily generous on compliments, this is the text I got from Rich Kanah, who's the executive director. After the female and male winners crossed the line, he texted and said, that was lights out, knocked down, off the charts good. And that to me was the best compliment we could have gotten probably out of anybody. So just to summarize, Tableau and the analytics that went into the planning of the course and the trial event as a whole really was critical for the ultimate success of the event. And it was great to see Atlanta really come out and shine on February 29th. So that is all I've got. If anybody wants to see the websites, Atlanta2020trials.com is the Olympic Trials website, and then just the general Atlanta Track Club site is atlantatrackclub.org. You can find some more information on the event there.